That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Speak No Evil, the fourth film directed by James Watkins. And it, of course, is a remake of the celebrated, critically acclaimed, 2022 Danish film by Christian Taftrup. It is being released courtesy of Universal on September 13th, 2024.
Do I know a James Watkins film?
Uh, I'm sure we watched Eden Lake at some point, his debut. But I know you watched The Woman in Black, right, with Daniel Radcliffe?
No.
Oh, what, or at least the sequel. He didn't direct the sequel. But yeah, those are his bigger films. Woman in Black actually is based on a notable book by a British genre writer, Susan Hill, who also wrote the short story that The Front Room is loosely based on with Brandy.
Oh, interesting. What is Speak No Evil about? A family is invited to spend a weekend in an idyllic country house, unaware that their dream vacation will soon become a psychological nightmare. What is your pull quote?
A dark satire which takes the social expectations of politeness to pernicious extremes, Watkins' anglicized take on the inherent brutality of the milquetoast, passive-aggressive suburbanite is aglow with the spunk of Peckinpah.
Wow. So I have said before that I was so tired of seeing this trailer. I feel like it played at every movie we went to for like the past year.
Moi, see, yeah, I was too much, too
And
early, and
then, and then I felt like from the trailer, it's like we know exactly what's going to happen. And it seems like we do, but you were still impressed by this film.
I was I went in with very low expectations because again, I've seen the original, and I'm very tired of these English language remakes of foreign films that are celebrated when they come out. And so I assumed that it was going to be almost exactly the same. And there are some changes in the third act which I thought were pleasant, especially if you find violence cathartic, which I guess I do. But yeah, you have not seen the original.
No, I have not. So I'm going to tell the basic story. Major, major spoiler. So if you don't want to know, turn the video off now. Okay. So Mackenzie Davis and her husband,
Played by Scoot McNairy, Louise, and Ben.
they have a child and their family goes to Italy. And
Mhm.
while they're there, they meet James McAvoy and his lady.
Paddy and Ciara, and his woman is played by Ashling Franciosi, who people should recognize from Jennifer Kent's excellent film, The Nightingale. We also just reviewed her in the film Stop Motion.
Oh, they have a kid. So the two families meet in Italy and hit it off. So when Mackenzie Davis and her man get back home to the UK, and they're recent transplants, they're actually Americans. We realize that they have some problems in their relationship when they get correspondence from James McAvoy. And so they have the idea to go visit James McAvoy's family in the UK countryside as like a getaway to clear their minds. And
Mhm.
if you've seen the trailer, you know what happens. Like a lot of weird, like micro stuff starts happening. And I haven't seen the original, but my understanding that it's sort of a tale of how being polite can get you hemmed up, like not advocating for yourself can get you into big trouble. So Mackenzie Davis and her husband or her family, they're experiencing a lot of weird little things like you see in the trailer. Like she's a vegan and James McAvoy is trying to get her to eat meat and some sort of James McAvoy's lady friend is talking weird to their kid and but ultimately, we realized that James McAvoy is a fraudster and a murderer. What he and this lady do is they find families and get them to give them all of their money, and then they kill them. So that's what their plan is for Mackenzie Davis and her family. But where this story strays from the original is that in the original, the good family ends up getting killed. But in this movie, it all ends in a scene at like a private dinner where James McAvoy is holding Mackenzie Davis and her family at gunpoint, and forces them to transfer all their money. But then they get the upper hand, Mackenzie Davis does, and they end up killing all the bad guys and escaping. The end.
Yes, and just a minor correction. It's not a dinner that it's happening, but they it's revealed that they have a cohort that did cook Mackenzie and her husband a private dinner that shows up in the third act to also try to kill them because he helps dispose of the bodies and gets a cut of whatever money that uh, Paddy and Ciara were able to absorb from their prey. And he also has a line that kind of, it seemed really, it wasn't clunky, but obvious, I think, to explain the motivation of this couple because they're doing, they're murderous con artists, but he's like, this guy says to James McAvoy, I don't know why you play with your food. You're like a cat.
Hmm. Well, I have a couple of thoughts straight away. First, I like James McAvoy. How is he in this movie?
Oh, if you like him, then it's must see. I mean, he is very OTT, but fun. Sometimes it teeters on camp. Um, we see him dancing shirtless to Laura Branigan's Gloria in Italy, and then he seems to have an obsession with the Bangles' Eternal Flame.
Oh,
Um, he in the fact there's one of one of my favorite things is he's alone in the car with Scoot McNairy, kind of looking at him intimately while he's singing along to Eternal Flame. Anyway, uh,
okay. Another question I had is because I assumed from just the trailer and I knew what the original was about. Um, how are they? So James McAvoy has a son, the boy who's mute, the one in the trailer who does the cutting with that I hated so much. So first off, do we know why that boy can't speak? Because I assume that James McAvoy cut his tongue out so he wouldn't speak. But so is that true?
very people under the stairs. Roach. Yes, we learn they keep, of course, like the Nazis did, I guess, too many records of their past misdeeds, but they have a photo album, which is how this boy, whose character name is Ant, played by Dan Hough, who shows the girl, Agnes, that they have a photo album of all the families that they invite to their spider web. And it's and of course, in his photo, he's sticking his tongue out, so we know for sure that he's been maimed. He also doesn't appear to speak English because he tries to pass the girl a note. So there's just no way for him to communicate. James McAvoy explains it as he has congenital in, inglosi, something that like you have like a dwarfed tongue, uh,
Oh,
but which is not
so
true. They cut his tongue out.
yeah, that just seems so risky that you would keep like a witness to your crime and hope that they don't find a way to tell on you.
Right, especially because you're toggling around Europe with this child. But then like he can't speak, and they keep explaining that he has emotional issues. So we're clued in to expect weird behavior from this kid. Nobody wants to get involved.
I'm assuming that they choose to keep a child because it makes it easier for them to meet other families with children.
Yes, it makes them seem safe.
So part of their scam is that James McAvoy is pretending to be a medical doctor.
Mhm. Again, I felt the original was kind of it felt like a hokey version of a Michael Haneke film, particularly Funny Games,
Mhm.
which Haneke remade in English as Funny Games US. But so in my mind, I went in thinking this is going to be like Foolish Games US. Uh, and, and it again, it starts out for the most part, it's very kind of similar to the original beat by beat. Like even in Italy, like this family that they clearly have issues. Mackenzie Davis, like their sex life isn't good, and Mackenzie Davis has had to uproot herself to move to London with her husband, and he caught her receiving a nude photograph of a man on her phone. But it's also playing it very safe, like she hasn't really cheated, but of course, since they're unhappy. But so even in Italy, they're how when we were when you go on a cruise ship And when you go out to dinner and they're like, do you want to eat alone or would you like to, they try to coerce you into meeting new people and having dinner with strangers, which I think that shit is miserable. They have to eat communally with all these people and they initially bond with McAvoy because there's this boring Danish couple that likes to talk about the cooking classes that they're taking in Italy. And I'm just the type of person that would not find myself in those situations anyway. And again, we're conditioned to be socially polite, and it's not advisable to engage in conflict at all times, choose your battles. But it's just hard watching these people be so dumb at first. I will say, and Scoop McNairy is probably quite perfectly cast as this henpecked husband that uh, can't quite even stand up to his wife. And I know you don't usually like Mackenzie Davis, but I thought she was actually a highlight. I think her performance is, especially in the third act, kind of a lot of fun in this.
Oh, because
Even though, go
I
ahead.
think I've said that I find her kind of boring.
Yeah. And maybe it's just direct. I think I still remember seeing her in that Drake Doremus film, Breathe In, for the first time. And I can't believe now she's playing the mother of an adolescent child. Um, but
Oh, speaking of that, James McAvoy's wife looks very young.
you thought she was a teenager in the trailer.
Yeah, I didn't realize. I thought she was a teen. But then there's a plot point that they've been married for how long?
She says, "Oh yeah, we've been married 17 years and you get more for murder." And Mackenzie Davis is like, "How old was she when they met?" There's just all kinds of slight passive moves that this couple is making on them to make them uncomfortable. Like as soon as they get there, like your child's going to be sleeping on the floor of this attic with this boy that seems emotionally disturbed. And then when they get in their own bedroom, the sheets are soiled. And it's just funny how we all have a threshold that we build up to, and mine would have been met a long time before this couple decides to actually speak up and say anything. I recently watched this old, I think it was made for television film with Stacy Keach and Samantha Egger called All the Kind Strangers, where Stacy Keach finds this home full of backwoods orphans that are looking for a dad figure and he finds out the woman that's the mother was actually kind of abducted into staying and helping them. So there are these weird psychological games going on that inherently are probably the most interesting bit, but we don't really get too much into characterization. There are lots of uncomfortable moments where we learn, like Ciara says she was born and she was raised up in a foster home. My parents didn't want me. And James McAvoy, it sounds like, used to get beat by his parents. And they're just, there's so many cringy moments, but that's the purpose. You're supposed to like be uncomfortable about this. And I think even more than in the original, there's all kinds of dialogue, especially from James McAvoy, that's really leading you into what you're supposed to be thinking. Like he shows up on a Vespa and takes their girl without a helmet on a ride in Italy and is driving crazy, but they don't want, they're kind of helicopter parents and they don't want to let her go. And he's like, "Oh, but it's hard to say no, isn't it?" And they keep saying, "Be honest, say how you really feel." And these people that are just refusing to do that. And then another annoying thing about this that drives me crazy. And again, this is probably why I just shouldn't be a parent, and I'm not. This 12-year-old girl she has like all these, she's got significant anxiety. She scratches herself. She has to have a breathing app because at night she can't breathe. And she's 12 and she has this bunny rabbit named Hoppy who's integral to how this film moves along. And they're like, by Christmas, Hoppy's got to get his own room. She won't part from this, like a safety blanket. So they abscond in the middle of the night with this, that like they're fleeing. And then the girl is all agitated, like, "Where's Hoppy? I need Hoppy, blah, blah, blah." So, that's the point where I've already seen this scenario and I'm shaking my head in the theater, like, "Oh God, I just want it to be over." And like these stupid dum-dums with this little girl, this insidious little girl, like you're just the rabbit's gone, he's dead. Okay.
Well, that's
So
also like the halfway point of the film, right?
Yeah. So
So you know it's not going to end.
no. So they go back and they're like, maybe we can tiptoe through the tulips and grab this goddamn bunny. And of course, James McAvoy is awake, wearing a robe that I own, by the way. And he's mad, he's teary-eyed, he's upset. And then, of course, through a series of circumstances, they draw the couple back into staying. They get them drunk over lunch. And then that's the scene in the trailer where the little kids who, for some obnoxious reason, are learning a dance routine. What we learn about Ant, whose parents were murdered and his tongue's cut out. I would not be learning choreo to Cotton Eye Joe. Anyway, that that scene from the trailer that happens. The girl is able to find out the secret about what's going on and gets her parents alone, and there's this long extended bit of anguish. The girl pretends to get her period so that this is the reason that they can finally leave. There's a flat tire. They have to change the tire. And then the family's all ready to go. They're going to get through the automatic gate, and everybody knows what's happening. They're going to come back and save Ant once they get to the authorities. And no sooner, they don't even get out the gate, and in the rearview mirror, they see James McAvoy tosses that kid in the water, in which but we've already established in this pond that he can't swim. So Scoot McNairy, I mean, it's great that there are people out there that always do the right thing, but he stops the car and goes to rescue this boy. And then, of course, they're hemmed up at gunpoint, transferring their 200,000 pounds to James McAvoy. But then this is where the third act becomes Peckinpah. It becomes Straw Dogs, essentially, where Dustin Hoffman and Susan George are defending the mentally handicapped man in their house against the inhabitants of this town. Oh, probably haven't seen Straw Dogs, but that movie is, I think, a good template for what James Watkins is doing here. And then it's just, the tension, you've been irritated this long, so it feels cathartic. It feels like a relief. But what I want to end with, just because I recently read The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, this seems very much like a movie Ayn Rand would be into, because showing the dangerousness of favoring collectivism over individualism, and if you don't, if you don't fend for yourself, there's no one out there. There's no one out there to save you. So I don't. There are different ways to approach that, and I think it's a good conversation piece, really, much like Funny Games. I think it's interesting to think of what you would do in that scenario. In my case, I wouldn't have been in this scenario, but you know,
What would you give Speak No Evil?
call me crazy, but I'm going to give it 3.5 because I had a lot of fun with it by the third act. So, and I hope this goes well for Watkins, whose earlier work I do find interesting.
3.5 out of 5. Okay. Join us on Patreon and listen to our podcast. Bye.